My daughter-in-law posted photos claiming I'd never see my grandchild. But when I saw that baby's birthmark, my world shattered. I knew that mark. I'd seen it 25 years ago on my missing daughter. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. The morning I saw that photograph, I was sitting in my kitchen drinking coffee from the same blue mug I'd used for 30 years. My name is Margaret Thompson, and at 67 years old, I thought I'd experienced every kind of heartbreak life could deliver. I was wrong. Let me tell you who I was before my world came crashing down. I spent 42 years as an elementary school teacher in a small Ohio town, the kind of place where everyone knows your name and your business. I wasn't the type of woman who demanded attention or caused drama. I was the one parents trusted with their most precious gifts, the one who stayed late to help struggling students, the one who spent my own money on classroom supplies because I believed every child deserved a chance. My life changed forever when my husband Michael died in a factory accident, leaving me alone to raise our 8-year-old son David. I was 32 years old, drowning in grief and medical bills, but I refused to let my boy suffer for circumstances beyond our control. I took a second job cleaning offices at night, working until my hands were raw and my back ached, all so David could have new school clothes and birthday parties like other kids. For 25 years, I poured every ounce of love and sacrifice into raising David. I missed social events, turned down dates, and gave up dreams of traveling because my son's happiness came first. When he graduated from college with honors, when he landed his first teaching job, when he met Sarah and fell in love, I felt like every sleepless night and every penny stretched had been worth it. But there was another child, another love that shaped who I became. Emma, my precious 3-year-old daughter with golden curls and eyes like summer sky. Emma, who disappeared from our front yard on a Tuesday afternoon in 1999, while I answered a phone call that lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Yes, I counted. I've counted those seconds every day for 25 years. Emma had a distinctive birthmark on her left shoulder, a perfect crescent shape that looked like a tiny moon kissed her skin. She used to trace it with her finger during bath time, giggling and calling it her special moon. The police said it would help identify her when they found her. They never did. For 2.5 decades, I carried the weight of that loss like stones in my chest. I became the grandmother who spoiled every neighborhood child, the teacher who saw Emma's face in every little girl with blonde hair, the woman who never stopped hoping that someday, somehow, I'd hold my daughter again. When David married Sarah 2 years ago, I thought my heart might finally heal completely. A daughter-in-law to love, grandchildren to cherish, a family growing instead of shrinking. Sarah was beautiful and confident, everything I'd never been. She worked for some kind of adoption agency, helping families find their perfect matches. It seemed poetic that she'd devoted her life to bringing families together. I was so naive, so trusting, so completely unprepared for the moment I would scroll through Facebook and see that photograph, that tiny baby with Sarah's caption about toxic people who would never touch her child. But it wasn't her words that stopped my heart. It was that crescent-shaped birthmark on the baby's left shoulder. Emma's birthmark. My missing daughter's mark, appearing on a child my son claimed as his own. Those final months before the baby arrived were the happiest I'd felt in years. Every morning, I'd wake up at 6:30 and make my way to the back garden with a steaming cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint my tomatoes and roses in golden light. The spare bedroom that had sat empty for so long was finally getting the love it deserved. I'd converted it into the perfect nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow because David and Sarah wanted to be surprised about the gender. The room was my sanctuary of hope. I spent hours in there, arranging and rearranging tiny clothes I'd bought during weekly trips to Target. Little onesies with dinosaurs and puppies, soft blankets in every shade of blue and pink, a rocking chair I'd found at a garage sale and lovingly restored with 3 coats of white paint. On the bookshelf, I'd lined up classic children's stories. Goodnight Moon, Where the Wild Things Are, and The Very Hungry Caterpillar. I could already picture myself reading those stories in my grandmother voice, the same gentle tone I'd used with David and tried to use with Emma during our brief time together. My Tuesday afternoons were devoted to knitting circles at St. Mark's Presbyterian, where I'd been a member for 35 years. The ladies there knew about my excitement and indulged my constant chatter about the coming grandchild. I'd arrive with bags full of soft yellow and green yarn, my needles clicking rhythmically as I created tiny sweaters and booties. Martha Henderson, who'd been my friend since David was small, would tease me about spoiling the baby rotten. "That child's going to have more handmade clothes than the royal family," she'd laugh, but her eyes were kind. She remembered how hard Emma's loss had been, how it had changed me from a young mother full of dreams into someone who carried sorrow like a second shadow. Every Sunday after church, David and Sarah would come for dinner. I'd spend the entire morning preparing David's childhood favorites: pot roast with carrots and potatoes, green bean casserole, and apple pie made from scratch using my mother's recipe. Those dinners should have been perfect, but something felt different since David's marriage. He was quieter than usual, more careful with his words. When I'd ask about baby preparations or suggest shopping trips for nursery items, he'd glance at Sarah before answering. Sarah herself was polite but distant, like a beautiful ice sculpture that never quite melted in my warm kitchen. She'd compliment my cooking and make appropriate comments about how grateful she was to have such a caring mother-in-law, but her smile never reached her eyes. When I'd suggest decorating ideas for the nursery or offer to host a baby shower, she'd find reasons to decline. "We want to keep things simple," she'd say, or "we're not really the celebration type." I told myself she was just private, maybe overwhelmed by pregnancy hormones. The countdown calendar I kept on my refrigerator marked each passing day with growing excitement. 2 months, 6 weeks, 1 month. I'd cross off each date with a red pen, my heart racing a little faster as we got closer. I'd already requested time off from my part-time job at the library, cleared my schedule of all unnecessary commitments. This grandchild would have my undivided attention and limitless love. During those peaceful evenings, I'd sit in the nursery rocking chair and imagine the future. Bedtime stories and lullabies, first steps and first words, teaching the child to garden, to bake cookies, to find joy in simple things. I'd already planned the Christmas morning when this little one would be old enough to tear through wrapping paper with chubby fingers. I had no idea that my beautiful dreams were built on lies, or that the people I loved most were about to destroy everything I held sacred. The first crack in my perfect world appeared on a Thursday morning when my phone rang with the news I'd been waiting 9 months to hear. David's voice was strained, almost mechanical as he said the words that should have filled me with joy. "Mom, the baby's here. Sarah had him early this morning." My heart soared as I grabbed my purse and keys, already planning my route to St. Mary's Hospital. "I'll be right there, sweetheart. Is everyone okay? Is Sarah doing well? Oh my goodness, I'm finally a grandmother." I was practically bouncing on my feet, ready to race out the door to meet my grandchild. "Actually, Mom," David's voice stopped me cold. "Sarah's really tired right now. The labor was difficult and she's not feeling up to visitors today. Maybe in a few days when she's had time to recover." I felt the first flutter of something wrong in my chest. "David, honey, I'm not a visitor. I'm your mother. I'm the baby's grandmother. Surely I can just peek in for a few minutes. I won't stay long, I promise." There was a long pause, and I could hear muffled voices in the background. When David came back on the line, his voice was different, more distant. "She really needs her rest, Mom. The doctors said too much excitement isn't good for new mothers. I'm sure you understand." I didn't understand. Not at all. When David was born, my mother had been in that hospital room before the epidural had even worn off. She'd held her grandson, cried tears of joy, and helped me navigate those first terrifying hours of motherhood. It was what grandmothers did. It was what families did. The next 3 days crawled by like torture. Every phone call I made went to voicemail. When David finally called back, his explanations sounded rehearsed. Sarah was still exhausted. The baby was having trouble latching. The hospital had strict visiting policies. They'd let me know when the time was right. On Sunday, I drove to their house with a casserole and a gift bag full of newborn essentials. My hands shook as I knocked on the door, excitement and worry warring in my chest. Through the window, I could see David pacing in the living room, a phone pressed to his ear. When he finally answered the door, he looked terrible. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and he'd lost weight. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I brought dinner and some things for the baby. I thought maybe I could help with housework or cooking while Sarah recovers." I tried to peer past him into the house. "Where is my grandson? Can I at least see him for a minute?" David positioned himself in the doorway, blocking my view. "This isn't a good time. Sarah's sleeping and the baby just went down for a nap. Maybe next week?" As I turned to leave, defeated and confused, I heard Sarah's voice drifting from the kitchen. She was on the phone, her tone sharp and clear. "No, absolutely not. She'll never get her claws into this baby like she did with David. I don't care if she is his grandmother. Some people are just toxic, and I won't have that poison around my child." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back to my car, my chest tight with shock and pain. Toxic? Poison? I'd loved David with everything I had, sacrificed my entire adult life for his happiness. How had my devotion become something ugly in Sarah's eyes? That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction I'd had with my daughter-in-law. Had I been too eager? Too involved? The doubt crept in like ice water through my veins. The sleepless nights that followed were filled with a torturous loop of self-examination. I sat at my kitchen table until 3 in the morning, sipping cold tea and replaying every moment of David's childhood, every interaction with Sarah, every word I'd spoken that might have been misconstrued as interference. Maybe I had been too involved. Maybe my love had somehow become suffocating without my realizing it. I pulled out photo albums from David's youth, studying pictures of birthday parties, graduation ceremonies, and family vacations. In every image, I saw what I thought was devotion, but now I wondered if others saw something different. Had I been the overbearing mother who couldn't let go? The thought made my stomach churn. Tuesday morning brought a call from my friend Martha at church. "Margaret, honey, how's that grandbaby doing? I haven't heard you mention a visit yet." Her innocent question felt like a knife twist. I found myself making excuses, parroting the same explanations David had given me. "Sarah's still recovering. First-time mothers need their space. The doctors want her to rest." Even as the words left my mouth, they felt hollow. Martha's own daughter had given birth 6 months ago, and the entire extended family had been camped out at the hospital within hours. But maybe every situation was different. Maybe I was being unreasonable to expect immediate access to my grandchild. I threw myself into research, spending hours online reading articles about postpartum depression, new mother anxiety, and healthy boundaries with in-laws. Every piece I read seemed to confirm that perhaps Sarah's behavior was normal, even protective. One article particularly stung: "Overbearing grandmothers, when love becomes control." I scrutinized every bullet point, wondering if I fit the profile of the interfering grandmother who needed to step back. The ladies at my knitting circle tried to be supportive, but their stories of immediate bonding with their grandchildren only made me feel more isolated. When little Sophia was born, I practically lived at Jennifer's house for 2 weeks, shared Carol Morrison, her needles clicking as she spoke. "Jennifer said she couldn't have managed without me." I smiled and nodded, but inside, I felt like a failure. What had I done wrong that my daughter-in-law couldn't stand the thought of my help? I began second-guessing every kind gesture I'd made during Sarah's pregnancy. The nursery items I'd bought, Had they been intrusive rather than generous? The baby shower I'd suggested, had it felt like I was taking over rather than celebrating? By the end of the week, I'd convinced myself that patience was the answer. I needed to prove to Sarah that I could respect her boundaries, that I wasn't the controlling mother-in-law she apparently feared I was. I stopped calling David daily, reduced my texts to simple check-ins, and resisted every urge to drive by their house. I spent Saturday afternoon returning most of the baby gifts I'd accumulated, telling the confused clerk at Target that plans had changed. The rocking chair in the nursery sat empty, a reminder of dreams that now felt presumptuous. I covered it with a sheet, unable to bear looking at the symbol of my naive expectations. Sunday's sermon at church was about patience and understanding, and I took it as a sign. Pastor Williams spoke about the virtue of waiting, of trusting that God's timing was perfect even when it didn't match our own desires. I clutched my purse and nodded along, convincing myself that this separation was temporary, that love and patience would eventually heal whatever rift had formed. I was so determined to be the perfect, non-intrusive grandmother that I completely missed the signs that something far more sinister was happening to my family. 3 weeks of self-imposed silence had felt like 3 years. I'd been the model of restraint, sending only brief text messages asking how everyone was feeling and resisting every maternal instinct that screamed at me to drive to their house and demand to see my grandchild. I told myself I was being mature, respectful, the kind of grandmother Sarah could eventually learn to trust. That Wednesday evening, I was grading reading assessments from my part-time tutoring job when my phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. Sarah had tagged me in a post. My heart leaped with hope. Maybe this was her way of extending an olive branch, of including me in their joy at last. I clicked on the notification with trembling fingers, expecting to see a sweet family photo or perhaps an announcement about when visitors might be welcome. Instead, my screen filled with an image that stopped my heart completely. There he was, my grandson. The most beautiful baby I'd ever seen, with David's dark hair and what looked like my mother's nose. He was sleeping peacefully in a white onesie, his tiny fist curled against his cheek. But it wasn't his perfect features that made my breath catch in my throat. It wasn't even Sarah's caption that would soon reduce me to tears. It was the birthmark. There, on his left shoulder, visible through the loose neckline of his outfit, was a perfect crescent shape. A moon-shaped mark that I knew as intimately as my own heartbeat. The same mark I'd traced with my finger during countless bath times 25 years ago. The same distinctive crescent that had been described in police reports, printed on missing child flyers, and haunted my dreams for over 2 decades. Emma's birthmark. My missing daughter's unique identifying feature, appearing on the baby my son claimed as his own. My phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the kitchen table. I stared at the ceiling, my mind reeling as impossible thoughts crashed through my consciousness like breaking waves. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Birthmarks didn't run in families like that. The police had told me Emma's crescent was 1 in 10,000, a unique marking that would help identify her if she was ever found. But there it was, identical in every way. The same size, the same placement, the same distinctive curve that looked like a silver moon had been pressed into tender skin. With shaking hands, I retrieved my phone and forced myself to read Sarah's caption. Our perfect little angel, safe and sound in our loving home. Some toxic people think they're entitled to be in his life, but real family knows that protection comes first. We'll never let anyone hurt what's precious to us. The words felt like daggers, but they were nothing compared to the photograph itself. I screenshot the image and zoomed in on the birthmark, comparing it to the mental image I'd carried for 25 years. Every detail matched perfectly. I stumbled to my bedroom and pulled Emma's photo album from the closet, my hands trembling as I flipped through pages of bath time pictures. There it was, over and over again, that same crescent moon birthmark on my 3-year-old daughter's shoulder. I held my phone next to a particularly clear photo from Emma's second birthday. They were identical. Absolutely. Impossibly identical. I sank onto my bed, the albums scattered around me like fallen leaves as the first terrible possibility began to form in my mind. This wasn't just about Sarah keeping me away from my grandchild. This was about something far more sinister, something that connected my missing daughter to the baby in that photograph, something that meant my family's betrayal ran deeper than I'd ever imagined possible. I spent 2 sleepless nights staring at those photographs, praying I was losing my mind. Insanity would have been a mercy compared to the truth that was slowly crystallizing in my heart. By Friday morning, I knew I couldn't live with the questions burning through my soul like acid. I printed out the Facebook photo and Emma's clearest baby picture, my hands steady with a strange calm that comes only from desperation. At 9 in the morning, I drove to David's school and waited in the parking lot like a stalker, watching through my windshield as children laughed and played on the playground where my son taught 5th grade. When the lunch bell rang, I intercepted him before he reached the teacher's lounge. "David, I need to talk to you, now." The color drained from his face when he saw the photos in my hands. "Mom, what are you doing here? I'm at work, I can't—" "Where did this baby come from?" I thrust the images toward him, my voice barely controlled. "Look at these pictures, David. Look at them and tell me what you see." His eyes darted between the photos, and I watched 28 years of my son's facial expressions flicker across his features. The same look he'd worn when he broke Mrs. Patterson's window with a baseball, when he came home past curfew in high school, when he'd hidden report cards with failing grades. Guilt. Pure, unmistakable guilt. "Mom, I don't understand what you're asking." "The birthmark, David." My voice cracked like a whip across the empty hallway. "That baby has Emma's birthmark. Exactly Emma's birthmark. How is that possible?" His face crumpled, and suddenly my confident adult son looked like the frightened 8-year-old boy who'd cried in my arms the night his father died. "Oh God, Mom, oh God, I'm so sorry." "Sorry for what?" But even as I asked, ice was already forming around my heart. The words tumbled out of him in broken sobs. Sarah couldn't have children, a condition called Mayer-Rokitansky-Kuster-Hauser syndrome that she'd hidden from everyone, including him, until after their wedding. The shame and desperation had consumed her, eating away at their marriage like cancer. She'd become obsessed with having a baby, any baby, no matter the cost. She found people, Mom, people who could arrange things, private adoptions that didn't ask too many questions. His voice was hollow, defeated. She said the baby's birth mother was a teenager who couldn't keep him. She said it was all legal, all above board. But it wasn't legal, was it? David's shoulders shook as he leaned against the hallway wall. I found out after. The adoption papers, they were forgeries. The agency Sarah used, they're part of something bigger, something that's been operating for years. He looked up at me with eyes full of shame and terror. When I saw the baby's birthmark, I knew. I knew what Sarah had done, but I was too scared to say anything, too scared of losing everything. The hallway tilted around me. "Are you telling me that Sarah bought a stolen baby? Are you telling me that my grandson might be—" "I don't know," he cried. "I don't know if he's Emma's child or just has the same mark. I don't know anything anymore except that Sarah said if anyone found out, we'd lose him and I'd go to prison as an accessory." I stared at this man I'd raised, this son I'd sacrificed everything for, and realized I was looking at a stranger. "You knew there was a chance this baby was connected to Emma, and you said nothing?" His silence was my answer. My son, my baby boy, had chosen to protect a lie rather than search for the truth about his missing sister. 25 years of unanswered prayers, and my own family had been hiding the key all along. I left David sobbing in that school hallway and drove home in a trance, my mind reeling with fragments of impossible truths. But something deep in my gut told me this was only the beginning. Sarah's involvement wasn't random coincidence. It was too calculated, too precise. A woman who worked for an adoption agency just happened to stumble into illegal baby trafficking? The pieces didn't fit together like an accident. They fit together like a plan. That evening, I did something I'd never done before in my life. I invaded my son's privacy completely and without apology. Using the spare key I'd kept since helping them move in, I waited until they left for Sarah's supposed doctor's appointment and let myself into their house. My hands shook as I rifled through Sarah's home office, a pristine space filled with files, certificates, and awards from Midwest Family Connections, the adoption agency where she'd worked for 6 years. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd built her career on uniting families while potentially destroying mine. In her desk drawer, buried beneath client files and business cards, I found a folder labeled Personal Research. Inside were documents that made my blood run cold. Background checks on families who'd lost children, newspaper clippings about unsolved disappearances dating back 15 years. And there, photocopied from what looked like police records, was Emma's missing child report with her physical description and that distinctive crescent birthmark circled in red ink. Sarah hadn't stumbled into anything. She'd been researching my family for years. But the most damning evidence was a business card clipped to Emma's file. Phoenix Solutions Specialized Family Services, with a phone number and an address in Chicago. Written on the back in Sarah's handwriting were the words, ET 1999, confirmed placement successful, client satisfied. ET Emma Thompson. My daughter had been reduced to initials in someone's business ledger. I photographed everything with trembling hands, my mind racing as the full scope of this nightmare revealed itself. Phoenix Solutions. I'd never heard of them, but their name was on documents throughout Sarah's personal files. They weren't just facilitating illegal adoptions, they were dealing in stolen children, and they'd been doing it for decades. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Coming home early, Sarah not feeling well. I had minutes to escape, but I needed one more piece of evidence. In Sarah's computer browser history, I found searches that confirmed my worst fears. She'd been researching me specifically, not just my family. Searches for Margaret Thompson, Emma Disappearance, Ohio, 1999, Thompson family current address, and most chilling of all, how to prevent biological grandparents from accessing adopted children. This wasn't about Sarah's inability to have children. This was about Sarah targeting my family specifically, perhaps as revenge or as part of some twisted business arrangement. She'd married David to get close to me, to torment me, to complete some sick circle that had begun 25 years ago when Emma vanished. As I slipped out their back door, I realized the scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't a desperate woman making a mistake. This was an organized criminal network that had been operating for decades, selling stolen children to couples willing to pay enormous sums and ask no questions. And somehow, Sarah wasn't just a client. She was a key player. The baby with Emma's birthmark wasn't coincidence. It was a message, a deliberate, cruel message, delivered by someone who'd infiltrated my family and destroyed my life not once, but twice. I drove home with evidence that could bring down an entire trafficking operation, but all I could think about was my missing daughter and the grandbaby I might never be allowed to hold. I made it home before the dam broke completely. The evidence I'd gathered lay spread across my kitchen table like pieces of a nightmare puzzle, but I couldn't look at them anymore. Emma's police report, Sarah's research files, the business card that reduced my precious daughter to initials in a ledger book. The weight of 25 years of unanswered questions crashed down on me all at once. I found myself standing in the doorway of Emma's bedroom, a space I'd preserved exactly as she'd left it that terrible Tuesday morning. Her tiny bed still held the same pink comforter with dancing teddy bears. Her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hoppy, sat propped against the pillow where she'd placed him after breakfast. The walls were covered with her crayon masterpieces, stick figures of our family holding hands under a yellow sun that took up half the page. I collapsed onto that little bed, clutching Mr. Hoppy to my chest as sobs tore through me like breaking glass. For 25 years, I'd tortured myself with guilt, believing I'd failed as a mother. I'd replayed that afternoon a million times, wondering what would have happened if I hadn't answered the phone, if I'd kept Emma inside, if I'd been watching more carefully. "I'm sorry, baby girl," I whispered into the rabbit's worn fur. "I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you." The guilt was suffocating, but it was nothing compared to the rage building in my chest. Those monsters hadn't just stolen my daughter. They'd let me blame myself for decades. While I'd been drowning in self-recrimination, they'd been profiting from other stolen children, destroying other families, counting money made from the most innocent victims imaginable. I pulled Emma's photo albums from the shelf with shaking hands, the same albums I'd shown to countless police officers, social workers, and volunteers over the years. Page after page of my beautiful little girl, her bright smile and golden curls, that distinctive birthmark visible in every bath time photo. She'd been so proud of that mark, tracing it with her finger and calling it her special moon that followed her everywhere. How many people had seen these photos? How many had memorized that birthmark for their sick business purposes? The thought that Emma's disappearance had been cataloged, researched, and filed away like inventory made my stomach turn. I found the video on my old camcorder, the last footage I'd taken of Emma just days before she vanished. She was dancing in our living room to a Disney song, spinning in circles and giggling at Mr. Hoppy who'd tumbled off the couch. Her voice, preserved in digital amber, called out, "Look, Mommy, Mr. Hoppy is dancing too." The sound of her laughter broke something fundamental inside me. All these years I'd been afraid to watch this video, afraid the pain would destroy me. Now I realized the pain had been destroying me slowly, day by day, for 25 years. I'd been living in a prison of grief and guilt while the people responsible had moved on with their lives, built careers, started families. Sarah had the audacity to marry my son, to live in my town, to taunt me with a stolen baby who bore my daughter's mark. She'd walked into my life like a predator circling back to admire her handiwork, and I'd welcomed her with open arms because I was too trusting, too broken to see the truth. But I wasn't broken anymore. Sitting in Emma's room, surrounded by 25 years of preserved memories and fresh evidence of unspeakable crimes, I felt something new growing in my chest. It wasn't hope. Hope was too fragile for what I was feeling. It was determination. Cold, hard, unshakable determination to make them pay for every stolen child, every destroyed family, every year of guilt they'd forced innocent parents to carry. Emma deserved justice. That baby with her birthmark deserved the truth, and I was going to give it to them. I stood up from Emma's bed, a different woman than the one who had collapsed there an hour before. The tears had stopped, replaced by something far more powerful: clarity. For 25 years, I'd been reacting to tragedy, letting grief control my life, allowing guilt to make me small and apologetic. That woman was gone. The first call I made was to my brother-in-law, Detective Frank Morrison, who'd retired from the Cleveland Police Department 5 years earlier. Frank had worked Emma's case in those first crucial weeks, and he'd never forgotten the little girl with the crescent birthmark who'd vanished without a trace. "Margaret?" His gravelly voice carried concern the moment he heard mine. "What's wrong?" "Frank, I need your help. I found Emma's case, and it's bigger than anyone imagined." My voice was steady, controlled. "Can you come over tonight? And Frank, bring everything you kept from the original investigation." While I waited for him to arrive, I organized the evidence I'd gathered like a prosecutor preparing for trial. Sarah's research files went in one folder, the Phoenix Solutions business card and Emma's circled police report in another, screenshots of browser histories, photos of the baby's birthmark, everything arranged chronologically to tell the story of a criminal conspiracy that had targeted my family across decades. Frank arrived within an hour, carrying a worn cardboard box that I recognized from those terrible early days after Emma disappeared. His silver hair was thinner now, his face more lined, but his cop instincts were as sharp as ever. One look at my evidence spread across the kitchen table, and his expression hardened into the same focused intensity I remembered from 1999. "Jesus Christ, Margaret," he breathed, studying Sarah's files. "She's been hunting your family like prey." "I want them destroyed, Frank. Not just arrested, destroyed. I want their entire operation shut down. Every child they've stolen returned to their families. Every penny they've made from this nightmare taken away." I met his eyes with steel in my own. "And I want to know what happened to Emma." Frank leaned back in his chair, processing the magnitude of what we were discussing. "This isn't going to be easy. These people have been operating for decades, which means they have protection, connections, money. They're not going to go down without a fight." "Good," I said simply. "I've been waiting 25 years for a fight." He smiled grimly. "The Margaret I knew before would never have said that. The Margaret you knew before was broken. This Margaret has nothing left to lose and everything to gain." I picked up the photo of the baby with Emma's birthmark. "They made one crucial mistake, Frank. They got cocky. They brought this fight to my doorstep, into my family, thinking they could torture me with their success. They underestimated what a mother's love can become when it's been denied justice for 25 years. Frank nodded slowly, his detective mind already working through the implications. "We'll need federal help. This crosses state lines, involves organized trafficking. I still have contacts at the FBI who work child exploitation cases." "Whatever it takes," I said firmly. "I don't care if we have to involve every law enforcement agency in the country. These people have stolen their last child." As Frank made his first calls to former colleagues, I walked back to Emma's room one last time. I picked up Mr. Hoppy and held him close, making a promise I should have made 25 years ago. "I'm coming for you, baby girl. Mommy's finally strong enough to bring you home." The hunt was about to begin, and this time I wouldn't be the prey. Frank's FBI contacts moved faster than I'd dared to hope. Within 48 hours, Special Agent Maria Santos was sitting in my living room, her sharp eyes studying the evidence I'd risked everything to gather. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of focused intensity that told me she'd seen horrors that would break most people. "Mrs. Thompson, what you've uncovered here represents one of the longest-running trafficking operations we've encountered," she said, photographing each document with meticulous care. "Phoenix Solutions has been on our radar for 3 years, but we've never been able to get inside evidence like this." The plan we developed was elegant in its simplicity. I would become the perfect bait, playing the role Sarah expected me to play, the broken, defeated grandmother who'd finally accepted her place. But every move I made would be calculated to gather more evidence and draw the criminals into the open. Agent Santos fitted me with recording equipment so sophisticated it was invisible. A tiny device sewn into the lining of my favorite cardigan, another hidden in my purse. "We need them talking about the operation, about other children, about how the network functions," she explained, as a technician tested the audio quality. "Sarah trusts you're harmless now. Use that." The hardest part was facing David. When I called to arrange a meeting, my voice was carefully crafted to sound defeated, apologetic. "Son, I've had time to think about everything you told me. I realize I was wrong to react so strongly. Could we talk? I want to make this right with Sarah." His relief was audible through the phone. "Mom, I'm so glad you called. Sarah's been worried you'd never forgive us. She really wants to have a good relationship with you." I almost laughed at the absurdity. Sarah wanted a relationship with me the way a cat wants a relationship with a mouse, to play with it before the kill. Over the next 2 weeks, I performed the role of my lifetime. I visited their house bearing gifts and apologies, cooing over the baby while secretly photographing everything that might be evidence. Sarah's home office, which I'd broken into weeks before, became accessible through innocent bathroom trips, where I quickly photographed new documents she'd carelessly left visible. The recordings were devastating. Sarah bragged about her connections to placement specialists, who could find babies for couples willing to pay premium prices. She mentioned other adoptive families by name, describing how grateful they were for Phoenix Solutions' discreet services. Most chilling of all, she talked about children as commodities, discussing ages and physical characteristics like a cattle auctioneer. The younger ones bring more money, but they're harder to transport, she told someone during a phone call I recorded while pretending to wash dishes. 3 to 5 years old is the sweet spot, old enough to travel quietly, but young enough to adapt to new families quickly. Emma had been 3 when she disappeared. My finest performance came when Sarah showed me photo albums of client successes. Families Phoenix Solutions had helped over the years. Page after page of stolen children with their new families, their histories erased, their real parents left to wonder forever what happened to their babies. I smiled and nodded, making appropriate comments about how beautiful the children looked, while my recording device captured Sarah's detailed explanations of how each placement had been arranged. "You know, Margaret," Sarah said with what she probably thought was warmth, "you're taking this so much better than I expected. I was worried you'd be one of those grandmothers who couldn't let go." "Oh, honey," I replied, patting her hand with grandmother affection. "I learned a long time ago that some battles aren't worth fighting. Family peace is more important than pride." If only she knew that every word she'd spoken was about to bring down her entire world. The plan for the final confrontation came to me in Emma's room, where I'd spent countless hours over the past month preparing for this moment. It had to be public. It had to be witnessed. Most importantly, it had to be somewhere Sarah felt completely safe and in control, so she wouldn't suspect the trap until it was too late. "I want to host a family reconciliation dinner," I told Agent Santos during our final planning meeting. "Something formal, with witnesses from both sides of the family. Sarah's been telling everyone how wonderfully we're getting along now. Let's give her a chance to show off her victory." The invitation list was carefully crafted. Sarah's parents, who'd driven up from Cincinnati believing their daughter had finally won over her difficult mother-in-law. David's closest friends from the teaching staff, people who'd known our family for years. Pastor Williams and his wife from church, because Sarah had been bragging to the congregation about how she'd healed the family rift through patience and understanding. I spent 3 days preparing the house, polishing the good china and setting the dining room table with military precision. Every detail had to be perfect, the kind of elegant family gathering that would make Sarah feel proud, important, utterly secure in her deception. The fresh flowers, the carefully planned menu featuring all of David's childhood favorites, even the soft classical music playing in the background, it all painted the picture of a grandmother who'd finally learned her place and accepted her daughter-in-law's authority. The recording equipment was more sophisticated this time. Agent Santos and her team had installed devices throughout the dining room and living area, cameras hidden in the flower arrangements, microphones embedded in the chandelier above the table. 3 undercover agents posed as catering staff from the local church, moving invisibly through my kitchen while monitoring every electronic signal. "Remember, Mrs. Thompson," Agent Santos reminded me as guests began arriving, "once you start the reveal, there's no going back. Sarah will realize she's been played, and people get dangerous when they're cornered. We'll move in the moment you give the signal, but until then, you're on your own." I watched through my kitchen window as cars pulled into the driveway. Sarah's parents arrived first, beaming with pride as they carried a gift basket and flowers for their successful daughter. David's teaching colleagues followed, chatting animatedly about how glad they were to see the family healing. Pastor Williams walked up the front path with his wife, both of them smiling at what they believed would be a celebration of forgiveness and reconciliation. Sarah and David were the last to arrive, and I felt my breath catch when I saw them through the front door's glass panel. David looked nervous, constantly adjusting his tie and checking his watch. But Sarah was radiant, carrying herself like royalty arriving at court. She wore a beautiful navy dress that showed off her figure, her hair perfectly styled, her smile bright enough to power the neighborhood. She looked like a woman who'd won everything she'd ever wanted. As I opened the door to welcome them, Sarah stepped forward and embraced me with what any observer would swear was genuine warmth. "Margaret, this is so wonderful of you to do this. It means everything to our family that you're choosing love over pride." "Oh, sweetheart," I replied, my voice steady as granite despite my racing heart. "Tonight is all about truth, about making sure everyone understands exactly what kind of family we really are." The guests gathered in my living room, wine glasses in hand, conversation flowing easily as everyone settled in for what they expected to be a heartwarming evening of family healing. None of them realized they were about to witness the systematic destruction of a criminal empire that had been 25 years in the making. I waited until dessert was served, and everyone was settled with coffee, their voices warm with wine and conversation about what a lovely evening it had been. Sarah sat at my right hand like a queen holding court, regaling Pastor Williams with stories about how patient love had finally broken through my stubbornness. David's colleagues nodded approvingly, commenting on how wonderful it was to see family harmony restored. "Before we finish our evening," I announced, rising from my chair with a gentle smile, "I have something special I'd like to share with all of you, a story about our beautiful new family member." Sarah beamed, clearly expecting another round of praise for her successful manipulation. "Oh, Margaret, you're too sweet. But please, tell them about our precious little one." I walked to the sideboard where I'd placed a manila envelope, my movements deliberate and calm. 25 years of grief had prepared me for this moment. You know, when I first saw photos of our grandson, I was struck by something remarkable, something that took me back 25 years. The room grew quieter, sensing a shift in my tone. I pulled out the first photograph, Emma's baby picture, the one showing her distinctive crescent birthmark clearly. "This is my daughter Emma, taken when she was 3 years old. She disappeared from our front yard in 1999. Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the room. Most of our guests knew the story of my missing daughter. Sarah's expression remained pleasant, but I caught the first flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Emma had a very distinctive birthmark," I continued, pointing to the crescent shape on her shoulder. "The police said it was 1 in 10,000, so unique it would help identify her if she was ever found." I placed the second photo on the table, Sarah's Facebook post showing the baby. Imagine my surprise when I saw this exact same birthmark on my grandson. The room fell completely silent. Sarah's face had gone white, her wine glass trembling in her hand. David looked like he was going to be sick. "At first I thought it was just an incredible coincidence," I said, my voice carrying clearly to every corner of the room. "But then I found these." One by one, I laid out the evidence. Sarah's research files with Emma's police report, the Phoenix Solutions business card with ET 1999 written in Sarah's handwriting, screenshots of her browser history researching my family, photos of her office documents detailing other stolen children. "Sarah hasn't just given us a grandson," I announced to the stunned room. "She's brought us evidence of a child trafficking ring that's been operating for decades, the same ring that stole Emma 25 years ago." Chaos erupted. Sarah's mother gasped and knocked over her coffee cup. Pastor Williams stood abruptly, his face pale with horror. David's friends stared in shocked silence, trying to process what they were seeing. But it was Sarah's reaction that confirmed everything. Instead of confusion or denial, her mask finally slipped. Her pleasant expression twisted into something cold and calculating. "You stupid old woman," she hissed, her voice carrying none of its usual sweetness. "You have no idea what you've done. Do you think this is some game you can win? At that moment, Agent Santos and her team burst through my front door, badges raised, weapons drawn. FBI, nobody, move! As federal agents swarmed my dining room, Sarah looked directly at me with pure hatred. You think finding that baby changes anything? Emma's been dead for 20 years, you pathetic fool. You'll never know what really happened to her. But I smiled back at her with 25 years of grief transformed into steel. Actually, Sarah, I already do. We found Phoenix Solutions archives. We know everything. The look of shock that crossed her face was worth every sleepless night, every tear, every year of wondering what happened to my baby girl. The federal courthouse in Cleveland was packed on the day of sentencing, 8 months after that dinner party that changed everything. I sat in the front row watching as Sarah Mitchell, her real name we'd learned, not Sarah Thompson, was led into the courtroom in orange prison scrubs. The confident woman who'd tormented me with stolen photos and cruel words looked broken now, her hair unwashed, her face gaunt from months of detention. Judge Patricia Holbrook read the charges with the gravity they deserved. Sarah Mitchell, you have been found guilty on 14 counts of conspiracy to commit kidnapping, 12 counts of human trafficking, 9 counts of falsifying adoption records, and 27 counts of racketeering in connection with the Phoenix Solutions trafficking network. The numbers were staggering, but they represented real children, real families torn apart by greed and cruelty. Agent Santos had explained to me how Sarah's operation worked. She'd started as a legitimate adoption counselor, but gradually built connections with criminals who could source children for wealthy couples willing to pay enormous sums and ask no questions. Emma had been one of their first successful acquisitions, sold to a couple in Oregon who'd raised her under a different name, never knowing her true origins. Emma Thompson Mitchell, the judge continued, reading the name that stopped my heart. Now known as Jennifer Hayes, age 28, was reunited with her biological family 6 months ago through DNA evidence recovered from the Phoenix Solutions archives. My daughter, alive. Not just alive, but thriving. A veterinarian in Portland with 2 children of her own, children who were my great-grandchildren. The reunion had been tearful, complicated, beautiful. Emma remembered nothing of her life before age 4, but she'd welcomed me into her world with the same generous heart I remembered from when she was 3. Her adoptive parents, Robert and Linda Hayes, were devastated to learn the truth, but supported Emma's relationship with me completely. They'd been victims too, believing they were adopting an abandoned child, not a stolen one. The baby with Emma's birthmark, my actual grandson, was indeed Emma's son. Through genetic testing, we learned that Tommy had been taken from a teenage mother in Detroit who'd been told he died during childbirth. She'd grieved for a child who was alive and being sold, 3 states away. The reunion between that young mother and her son had been one of the most beautiful moments of this entire nightmare. Sarah Mitchell, Judge Holbrook's voice cut through my memories. You are hereby sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Your co-conspirators in the Phoenix Solutions network will face similar sentences. David received immunity in exchange for his testimony, but our relationship remained fractured. He'd left teaching, moved to another state, and was undergoing therapy to process his role in the cover-up. I hoped someday we could rebuild what Sarah had destroyed between us, but that would take time neither of us was ready for yet. Phoenix Solutions was dismantled completely, its assets seized and distributed to victim compensation funds. 43 children were reunited with their biological families. Dozens of adoptive families learned the heartbreaking truth that their beloved children had been stolen, not abandoned. The ripple effects would continue for years, but justice was finally being served. As I left the courthouse that day, I carried with me photos of Emma's children, my great-grandchildren, who called me Grandma Margaret and drew me pictures of our visits to the zoo. Emma had invited me to spend Christmas with her family in Portland, The first Christmas we'd shared in 25 years. Sarah had tried to destroy my family, but instead, she'd given me back more than I'd ever dared hope for. Sometimes the greatest victories come disguised as the deepest losses, and love truly is stronger than the cruelest intentions. 2 years have passed since that dinner party that changed everything, and I'm writing this from Emma's back porch in Portland, watching my great-grandchildren chase fireflies in the summer twilight. Tommy, now 4 years old, has his mother's laugh and his great-grandmother's stubborn streak. His sister Lily, who's 6, insists on reading me bedtime stories instead of the other way around, just like Emma used to do when she was small. The house is filled with the sounds I thought I'd never hear again. Emma calling Mom from the kitchen, children's laughter echoing through the hallways, the gentle chaos of a family that's been given a second chance at love. Sometimes I catch Emma watching me with a mixture of curiosity and recognition, as if some deep part of her remembers being 3 years old and tracing her moon-shaped birthmark while I sang her lullabies. My story isn't unique, and that's perhaps the most important thing I want you to understand. Every year, thousands of children disappear into trafficking networks that operate in plain sight, hidden behind legitimate businesses and respectable facades. The monsters who steal these children count on parents being too broken by grief to fight back, too isolated to demand answers, too trusting of systems that claim to be helping. I learned that evil rarely announces itself with fangs and claws. It comes with a smile, with professional credentials, with explanations that sound reasonable until you dig deeper. Sarah wasn't some street criminal operating from the shadows. She was a respected member of our community, trusted with helping families find their children. The very respectability of her position allowed her to destroy dozens of families while everyone applauded her dedication to bringing families together. For 25 years, I blamed myself for Emma's disappearance. I carried guilt that belonged to criminals, shame that should have been theirs, sorrow that they profited from while I suffered. That's how these predators succeed, by making their victims complicit in their own torture, by convincing loving parents that their children's disappearances were somehow their fault. The most important lesson I want to share is this: trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. When people in your life suddenly become defensive about simple questions or try to make you feel guilty for caring about your own family, pay attention. When legitimate professionals refuse transparency or try to rush you through processes that should be careful and thorough, ask more questions, not fewer. I also learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting, and justice doesn't erase pain, but both can transform suffering into strength. Every child we helped reunite with their family, every trafficking ring we helped expose, every parent who got answers they'd been seeking for years, validated the choice to fight instead of surrender. Emma and I talk sometimes about those lost years, about the family moments we'll never get back, about how different our lives might have been if Sarah's network had never existed. But we also talk about the future, about Tommy's upcoming first day of kindergarten, about Lily's dream of becoming a marine biologist, about the Christmas traditions we're creating together. The past can't be changed, but the future is still being written, and love really is stronger than the cruelest intentions. Now, I want to hear from you. If you discovered that someone in your own family was connected to something this horrific, would you have the courage to expose the truth, even knowing it might destroy the people you love? Would you choose justice over family loyalty, or would you find a way to protect both? Have you ever ignored your instincts about someone because they seemed respectable or trustworthy, only to later discover you were right to be suspicious? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories that prove the power of never giving up on the people we love.